Okay, guys, bang, bang, bang. This is Alternative Data News. I'm Aubrey Hodges. Let's get into it. Today, I've got a really exciting guest joining me on the show. He's leading the corporate efforts at a firm that has really become one of the premier go-to alternative data firms. No introduction needed. Thinknum Alternative Data has really become a household name, just simply off the backdrop of the latest data set that they've created, a Reddit data set, which is allowing institutional investors to identify signals, real-time information, and stay up to date with everything that's happening with Reddit, WallStreetBets. And this primarily came off the backdrop of the earlier trade related to Gamestop. Super excited to have Abdus Muwwakkil join me on the show. Abdus, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Aubrey. Pleasure to be here. Nice to chat this morning on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great Friday, one of the rare ones that we've had. So listen, why don't, we've known each other for quite some time. Why don't you give the quick sort of 30-second backdrop on yourself, and then ultimately kind of talk me through, how did you sync up with the founders and the team over at Thinknum?
Sure. I pretty much like to consider myself a startup veteran. I started trying to build my first company in college at Temple University back in Philadelphia. At the time, I was trying to build a mobile application and platform for students to order from food trucks on campus. So it was kind of at that early 2012, 2013 intersection of, Grubhub, Yelp, and kind of this online digital engagement of food companies. So that's what kind of got me first kind of building my first business plans, talking to customers, working with engineers to build apps and things like that. As I was graduating, I had already pretty much concluded that, when it came to, unfortunately, the company didn't necessarily pan out, but, I maintained kind of that entrepreneurial knack, started getting engaged with the local tech scene in Philadelphia, the local venture capital game, working at an accelerator by the name of Dream It Ventures, really, just trying to become immersed in, entrepreneurship in Philly. Things led to another, and I ended up essentially doing this, working with one startup by the name of Converge, and we did a whole road trip across the country. So I pretty much spent 2 months on the road, went to 30 different states, dozens of tech conferences, co-working spaces, essentially getting in front of our users, our customers, and trying to build growth for the company. Long story short, they ended up moving to Austin, Texas. I decided to move to New York City. We did a little remote kind of thing for a while. Things didn't pan out, and I had to kind of rebound in New York and figure out how to make a living. So, the first thing I did was go back to my roots, started working, kind of odd jobs at Craigslist and things like that, but eventually landed a gig working with some health and fitness medical devices and sensors, and spent 5 years doing that, took the company public, and then, kind of coming on the way down, I connected back with the co-founders, Greg and Justin, and here I am at Thinknum since last 2020. At the beginning of January, I started, and it's been quite the ride, you can say.
Yeah, wow, impressive backdrop. Really great background. Super incredible. Sounds like an amazing journey. And to kind of reconnect with, the co-founders now. I mean, it seems like you guys, really have great, great relationships and have done some great work as well. So, for folks who aren't familiar with, Thinknum, what is Thinknum? What do you guys do? What's the core competency? And then kind of talk me through, like, how did you guys merge from the traditional, web scraping model to what you guys have really become well known for now, more recently, which is this, Reddit WallStreetBets data set?
Yeah, sure. So you pretty much you want to understand, who Thinknum is, who we are, and kind of the evolution of how we are where we are today, right?
That's correct.
Um, sure. So, I was not in the picture really at this point, but it really starts with the two founders, Gregory Ugui and Justin Zen, who were both working respectively at Goldman Sachs and a hedge fund. And they saw a similar problem with, essentially these firms having teams across different pods, across different sectors, all working on essentially obtaining the best available data. And there was just really a problem of kind of disparate, essentially inefficient process to kind of centralize that information. Everyone had different spreadsheets. Everyone was kind of working redundantly in different ways. So the big kind of spawn of Thinknum, so to speak, was to be able to kind of help various teams, various professionals within firms work in a more consistent manner as it related to their collection of data, and then the subsequent analysis of it. So that was kind of the big problem. Where the company is now is essentially we aggregate online data. When we talk about alternative data, we're talking specifically about data found on the web. And what we do is we should clean that data up and structure it into data sets where organizations from major financial institutions to asset managers all the way to the corporate side, they can use this data specifically for the business problems that they're working on. So we have about 34 plus different data sets covering hundreds of thousands of companies, both here in the US as well as globally, private and public companies. And the data sets that we have, we've really been collecting this information since 2013, 2014. So one of the advantages of internet data in itself is that, the internet's pretty much the biggest thing in the world these days. Every day, every second, tons, like I don't need to get into like the quintabytes or, whatever new terms we're making up to describe the volume of data, but it's being generated every day. So there's this real-time intelligence component for firms that start using this information. They can start seeing things faster than others in their space. So we do a good job of getting that data and providing it back. But over time, as you collect this data, you start building these historical data sets, these historical repositories that
Sure.
analysts. It's not just important to see, oh, this ticker's going up, and that's because they're probably growing their hiring and sales. That's good information, but when you can compare it to their 2 years, 3 year history, 4 year, and to even some of our data sets, 15-year history, you can really have the right context to then start making actual business decisions, whether it be making investment trades or allocating capital.
Right.
So that's the nutshell. I know you asked specifically about this WallStreetBets situation. I think it was kind of spontaneous in that we ironically enough, we were kind of following what was happening in WallStreetBets. And this was when it was probably at 3 million members. And so, we saw chatter, and we saw people talking about the stock. And I actually ended up, even just individually, I actually did a meme just to kind of poke fun at what was happening. And we saw actually one of the memes go viral. And so, there we saw the seriousness from the actual community that, like, okay, this is hot, like GME,
Right.
people are really excited about this. And then kind of along those same lines, you started seeing kind of media organizations start, talking about it and talking about even particular hedge funds that were involved in it as well. And so this storyline kind of started becoming of, hey, these Wall Street Redditors, hedge funds, it was an interesting dynamic that, I think we didn't want to sit on the sideline and just kind of watch, being that, we were living in it as well. So with that said, over the next week or two, as the stock was kind of getting hot, some of our customers started requesting, hey, like, do you have data on this?
Sure.
So I probably for the first few, we were doing one-off, like, probably, data aggregates, so to speak, like, we'd pull some data in for them. But once a number of clients started asking us, I think that was when the founders probably decided it'd be best to create a more systematic approach to get that data and deliver it for our clients.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, one thing's for sure, it definitely was pretty timely, and I can only imagine, real time access and information to that type of transparency is enormously, valuable, helpful, and really helps, people on the street kind of eliminate, the noise from what's actually happening. You may want to track down that meme you created. It could be a pretty valuable NFT at some point in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I share those sentiments. I have them, and I'll definitely share them with you, like around the show or after the show, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, well, look, I mean, that was a really great intro. Can you kind of kind of talk me through? Obviously, the offering is unique, but who specifically does Thinknum work with? Obviously, there's the institutional folks that you and I tend to work with on a day-to-day basis, but who else is sort of engaging and utilizing you guys and coming to you for critical insights?
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit interesting, because when you're at a startup, you have limited resources. We raised a Series A 2 years ago, about 11.6 million Series A, which is in my eyes relatively low compared to what you see these days, where a Series A can go up to $30 million in some cases. So with that said, and even from just a cultural standpoint, we're pretty focused on delivering results. So when you have a data product, you kind of want to be able to sell it to everybody because everyone needs data, right? But
Sure.
just
Sure.
based on the nature of the company, I think the first main start was in the financial services space, working with hedge funds, asset managers, and kind of innovative institutional banks who were looking for novel data sources that others in the industry weren't using. That like pretty much the whole antithesis here is like you can use quarterly reports, you can see what's being said on the media, you can see what companies are talking about in terms of like press releases, but everyone has access to that information at the same time. So
Sure.
really it's about what firms are looking to even kind of get past that point. And so, obviously you have a lot of kind of, quantitative shops. You have, just some serious data driven companies who their bread and butter is getting data as fast as possible and being able to, move it through the value chain to get it to business stakeholders or, owners of the firm who are going to make important decisions based off of it. Uh,
Right.
so,
Right.
so financial services, definitely, and that even includes, real estate firms, REITs, and various kind of, businesses that are, near the investment space. Interesting enough, when I joined the company, I was really given a different mandate for the company, which had already had some slight traction, but just enough to really wet the palate, which was repackaging our same data products and solutions for the corporate market. So a significant part of my focus has actually been selling into Fortune 1000 companies, and trying to figure out which industries and which sectors and which types of functions are actually going to be most approachable for the type of data we have. So we've definitely found some good opportunities across HR, specifically with talent intelligence professionals who are looking to understand labor markets and labor market movement in order to hire the best talent. Uh, Competitive intelligence across kind of high let's say like pharma companies, big automotive companies are continuously trying to figure out how they can stay ahead on changes in the market, as well as obviously your high your internet and high tech companies like from your social media giants, etc. So we really span kind of the whole gamut here, and we're definitely finding traction. But every company, every professional within that company is going to have a use case that's specific to them. So really figuring out how to not just say, hey, we're Thinknum, we have great data, please use it so you can make better decisions. It's more, like, how do we understand what our clients, what major corps, what high growth tech startups are going through? What are they trying to do? How are they trying to beat out their competitors? And how can we align our data to support them on those efforts?
Right. Absolutely. And you mentioned some things earlier, which I found intriguing. More so around working with, hedge funds and how they have been sort of the early adopters of using data, and that's primarily due to the infrastructures that they have. When you're talking about large terabytes of data, not everyone has the infrastructure or the team set up to ingest a high frequency amount of data, and more so be able to understand the story, the backdrop, identify the signals in the data in order to even generate return on their capital spent, right? How have you noticed the difference between the infrastructure from funds that have used Thinknum on whether it be the discretionary side or the quantitative side to how does that infrastructure look for folks on the corporate side, in terms of ingesting the data and how they're able to utilize it and make sense of it.
Yeah, it definitely varies. And then even when it is similar, then like based on the number of people on the team can kind of influence how things really pan out when it comes to how they're going to ingest data. Um, but with that said, as a company, I think we've done it pretty smart or intelligently, so to speak, which is really keep it as simple as possible. So, if you're a quant shop or if you have a systematic, way to bring in data and to, evaluate it within the organization or to automate, decisions based on it, then you simply use our API. And we have APIs specific to each data sets. And, we don't really do a lot of limiting and all that stuff that you see on, some of the other type of APIs you can get from other companies. We're really, just about, hey, if you want this data and you need to have it, by the second, by the minute, then, here it all is. And, we'll trust that what to do with that data once it's on your side. The second part of that is, definitely an important aspect of the company, which is we have a web portal where it's, no code necessary. You can simply type in a ticker, type in a company, and you can query that company across our 30 different data sets. So we have a really basic dashboard that has a lot of kind of under the hood functionality that, as a novice analyst or, maybe kind of just a junior analyst getting your first summer internship or you're getting your first year in the company, maybe, you kind of just spend time building dashboards from the data sets and companies in the Thinknum platform. Whereas, once you're kind of more advanced, there's tons of ways to query the data that's very neatly structured. You can, pull up basic charts to look at, quarter to quarter performance, month to month performance, week to week performance. Things like our data sets like job listings where you're tracking who a company's hiring, the rate they're hiring at, where they're hiring in. You can always overlay various financial metrics to kind of see, essentially, oh, I want to see how many job openings did they have this month and how is that, connected to their stock performance this month. And so, one of our big things is we don't really consider ourselves an insights company. We're just really trying to present the highest quality, freshest, and, essentially highest velocity data we can as
Sure.
possible. And,
Right.
let the smarter, better domain experts within, their industry kind of just be able to know that they're going to get good data and they'll be able to make the decisions that they know how to make.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I can certainly see the value in that. As you continue to have these conversations with folks on the corporate side, how much of the process in the business, sort of cycle is building fluency for people and helping them sort of think through how they can apply, data, versus your analyst or your portfolio manager, who tends to might have a higher level of fluency when it comes to data, just given that they've had a longer track record with it. Do you find that there's a gap in the level of fluency or intelligence that people have on the corporate side versus the institutional investor side?
I think at this point, everyone understands the value of data. Everyone understands the value of getting access to information that you can make a decision on, or that you can share with your boss who can make a decision on it. And if it pans out to be a good decision and that data and information was the edge that got it there, they understand kind of the benefits and the value of that. So it's, I think that part is clear. I think, and to be honest, like sure, like we kind of all shudder at the thought of an enterprise sales cycle where it's like 3 to 6 months to 12 months in some cases. But
Sure, if
I'll
not
be, yep, go
longer.
ahead.
Yeah, if not longer. There've definitely been some funds that, even now that I've recently onboarded, and sometimes those conversations are, minimum 12 months, 15 months, sometimes 2 years.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to navigate that cycle, kind of keep people engaged, provide value add content, really help them identify usage cases, for the data, when it's appropriate, always be proactive as well. This is a game of at bats. You're never going to, persuade someone, within the first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And so, it's not for the faint at heart, but
Uh-huh.
those that do it well understand, the long term, tenaciousness, that you need. But it also comes down to really driving value and helping anyone, whether it be a hedge fund, corporate, really sort of connect the dots and find those multiple usage cases, for themselves, their organization, company. And that's what's going to drive, that sales cycle, quicker, faster, and that's what's gonna, give you some of the larger wins and at bats.
Yeah, no, you're speaking the truth. I guess it maybe like it needs to be flipped on its head a little bit. I think a lot of companies, tech companies, whoever, fintech companies, we always, or even in healthcare, I've seen, we essentially we take this like podium approach where it's like, oh, we need to educate our customers. But really, these companies need to learn from their customers. And I think when you don't learn from your customers, it's harder to sell to them. And
Yeah,
so, when we're creating this content, when we're doing webinars, when we're writing articles, when we're, pushing out, video interviews, it's as much as it is about us trying to tell people about, great things happening and what we're seeing in the market. It allows us, it's kind of like the concept of a teacher who teaches is learning about the material as they teach it. It's kind of like if you can't teach it, then you don't understand the material kind of thing. And so
sure.
if you can't sell it, then you don't understand what your customer is actually going through. So, for us in that kind of that early stage of like first dealing with clients and trying to, get them to start using our products, I think naturally we want to go after the people who already know about us and they're ready to buy. And, we don't really have to educate too much. We just need to nail down the right business case. But for the cases where we do find ourselves doing these webinars on, how to build data teams at a quant shop, or, how to, survive in, a hyper competitive market, this is as much of a learning exercise for us to understand what our clients are going through as much as it is for us to try to tell them kind of how markets are changing, today in real time.
Yeah, no, I 1000% agree with you. You need to be spending time talking to your peers, your clients, the funds that you work with, the corporates that you work with, understanding their businesses, understanding how the pendulum is swinging from left to right, how they make key decisions, what they're thinking about their business, not right at this moment, but where they envision their business going forward in the next 12, 24, 36 months. And then coming to them with real products that offer value and a solution. And then also understanding, look, not everyone's going to write $1 million check or even $100,000 check. Sometimes that relationship needs to start small. You need to prove your worth, and you need to be able to grow that relationship over time. Again, this is about the longevity of relationships and business relationships, and keeping clients there and happy. And ultimately, it needs to be mutually beneficial, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So I want to kind of segue, it's obviously been a very sort of intriguing year with COVID and a number of other just challenging, areas to work through in this type of business environment. We haven't had a chance to go and do conferences like we normally do, where you can, do 10 to 15 meetings, also subsequently see people randomly, for impromptu meetings, catch up with people, as we sort of come, slowly, back into an environment where companies like Battlefin and Eagle Alpha, New Data, et cetera, start to want to reemerge with some of these conferences that they've had. How do you think that they're going to have to sort of pivot their business to really bring back some of the value that these conferences once provided? It's a very different landscape to try to do it in a virtual context versus the in-person, which I'm also looking forward to getting back to as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's pretty much it's a billion-dollar question for any industry or any group of companies that are dependent on an industry that's largely driven by in-person meetings. So obviously, I'm not necessarily qualified to give the right answer, but I can give you my perspective, I guess, as someone who's done tons of trade shows and conferences over the past 10 years, and and have like back in 2016, I was at CES 2016, Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, and that was my first like major like experience to like, okay, this is just impossible to see all of this stuff. So I have those experiences, and then I also have like the much more kind of acute, like segmented, targeted conferences where it's like specifically just alternative data.
Well, yeah, the ones that we go to. So let's kind of segue into
Yeah.
The ones that we typically will go to. Battlefin or
Yeah.
Eagle. Like, I personally think, look, some going to some of the great large events are fantastic, but Battlefin, Eagle Alpha, they're probably going to be able to need to create much more smaller, intimate events that really sort of provide value to both the institutions, the corporates, as well as the data providers as well. And sometimes doing 15 meetings is great, but I would much rather have 3 to 5 quality meetings versus
Exactly.
meeting with 15 people, right? And so that intimacy allows you to create deeper relationship. It allows you to really have more than 12 minutes of speed dating, which is a very efficient way of doing things. But by the end of the 12th date, everybody's head is really spinning, on a swirl, right? And so the guy sitting across from you is tired, you're tired. That at bat is probably not the best one. So these smaller roundtable sessions, in my opinion, I think is where they need to, be, pivoting. And it's also going to give us a chance to sort of emerge and get back to events, I wouldn't say sooner or quicker, but in a structured way that people could be comfortable with, and have that scaled over time. What are your thoughts there?
All right. So I hear you, and to be honest, I feel that same way. Like better quality, more succinct. Like obviously maintaining safety and comfort at these gatherings once we're all vaccinated up and seeing each other. So for me, it's more interesting to take it even a step further, right? It's what are these organizations trying to do? I look at them almost like a multi-sided marketplace, or like multi-sided platform. It's on one end you have people who need great data. On the other end, you should have people who have great data. So it's about how do you bring them together. And for what you just discussed, I think that is kind of a perfect way to bring people together. But you also kind of mentioned this point of like the quality aspect. And like, my mind is just kind of willing, and like maybe I'm just throwing stuff that isn't really going to stick on the wall here. But I think these companies should become more data driven. They should understand, they probably do, but they should systematically understand, when someone comes looking for data, which company is going to have that best use case, or be able to provide that best use case, or be able to grow into that particular use case. And
Exactly.
so if they're able to do that systematically, then over time, the quality of the interactions of the different operators on the platform should improve. So, I think, it's about being more efficient, like, almost kind of running like a data company instead of just an events company to make sure that they understand, because they have great access. They know what people are looking for. They know the supply. They know the demand. That's such a great opportunity. But if not like exercised in terms of the business model, like then like as you see, COVID hits, and like no matter how much knowledge you have there, because you're dependent on that as your source of revenue, then it's not necessarily conducive because there's external factors that can influence that. So I would assume like there's probably a lot of data that these companies have. They should put it to work to optimize whatever matching algorithm they're doing for both sides of the platform.
Yeah. And what I'd like to see, whether it be from Battlefront, Eagle Alpha, new data is more engagement. They need to be speaking to folks more, truly understanding the landscape of people's businesses on both sides of the table, on both sides of the coins, irrespective of who it is. That's what's going to drive, the inherent value, right? And it's not just good enough to do that, when you have a request, that needs to be done proactively as well. That way, throughout those conferences, throughout the gatherings, you're really syncing high quality people, together. And so I think, I think those are some of the areas that, I'd like to see sort of evolve, of this, which is, going back to what we discussed, which is understanding your customers at the end of the day and understanding their why and, their pain points and, things that they're trying to accomplish, not just now, but, in 12, 24, 36 months from now.
Exactly. So the short end, like do a survey all your clients and, your attendees, get their feedback and start getting those first events together. And, on the back end, make sure that, the companies you're matching and what your vendors are looking for are aligned and, and just go for it.
Absolutely. So I want to kind of take this in a different way. I've really kind of enjoyed this conversation. If we were to fast forward, 10 years from now to the year, 2031, what do you believe will be some of the largest use cases that will unfold as part of, utilizing alternative data?
I think alternative data in terms of 2030, so that gives me some wiggle room to talk about things that don't even make too much sense right now. I think small lending. I'm seeing a lot of stuff in kind of this payment world where you got these developing countries, you got companies who can make money off of a growing wealth level in these developing countries as well as in established countries. I think alternative data will provide great opportunities in that space. How exactly, I'm not sure yet. And it could be its own podcast discussion in itself. What else? I think, at least for Thinknum, one of our strongest forces of alternative data is in the labor markets. So any company that operates on, having access to the top talent has to be using alternative data. Especially too that, for most companies, 70% of their balance sheet is specific to just their labor force. So it's not just a business case that an analyst is trying to solve or even a department manager. It's a business case for the CFO of the company to make sure is, happening at a level that, the company is, needs to operate by. So who needs that? Like, your Googles of the world, versus Apple, that's a constant engineering battle, right? Sometimes I think about Dropbox and Box, two kind of, giants in the cloud management space, but, both trying to figure out, what's in the market, how can they kind of transform it. So, essentially big players who want to kind of keep transforming the space. So like for me, I think about cloud, which has been around for a long time, but you haven't seen too many new companies propping up that are at least trying to disrupt Dropbox or Box yet. But, as these guys get older and maybe the saturation of the market kind of gets a little stale, then you start seeing these newer players pop up who are going to have access or find new data and use that to kind of, transform the space. What else? Definitely pharma companies. I think,
Big health. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I think the pharma industry has a huge opportunity to put data to use as it relates to, being able to anticipate the newest drugs coming on the market. I think these huge kind of omni-channel, drop ship, warehousing, e-commerce retail companies, when you're selling millions of products affecting billions of people, you need to understand those products, and you need to understand consumer sentiment around those products, and you need to
Sure.
understand how to keep inventory churning and see which products are performing best. And so obviously you get this data for your company, but don't you need to benchmark against the industry? So, if you're Amazon, you need to know how, maybe not just, Amazon's funny because they have so many different products across so many different things, but like even just specifically, if you're Amazon and you're selling electronics online, wouldn't it be good to know how Best Buy's e-commerce is doing? Or like to give you a funny 2030 example, right? If you're Amazon and you're making, you own Twitch, you're making more money off of gaming, and now you see GameStop, they're transforming to an e-commerce gaming digital retailer. Now you need to kind of benchmark against that. And sure, you could be like, hey, we don't care about them, let's ignore them. But that's that, as we know, that's how companies tend to go extinct. They start having blind spots, stop tracking what's happening in the market. They kind of get comfortable being the market leader, and next thing you know, they're getting snapped up by the big whale.
Exactly. Look, I've got another usage case for you. So, if you think about data as a whole, I personally think that one of the things that we mentioned, obviously, healthcare and pharma, but diseases and cures. We're going to be able to treat diseases and come and identify cures much faster by being able to understand nuances of data that we never had access to, exposure to, or be able to understand quicker. And that's going to be incredibly encouraging to see where healthcare goes. But even more intriguing, I think municipalities and cities specifically will become some of the largest consumers of data. I mean, if you think about Uber and Lyft as companies, the amount of data, and even Tesla for that matter, the amount of data that they are, collecting per ride will transform how companies, from an infrastructure standpoint, will completely change their cities, and where new routes can specifically be go, and what type of formation will happen, and that will impact a number of things, from housing to real estate development to warehousing, which you mentioned as well. Could you imagine municipalities and cities analyzing data to understand foot traffic, web traffic, the mobile traffic for where automobiles are going, where dense populations are currently, and how cities can actually become much more fluent at gauging how they need to structure their cities going forward. And then all new types of cities will emerge as a result of this as well, which people never would have considered in terms of new spaces and new areas of land that could be utilized for different types of communities and commuters and so forth and so on.
Yeah, I definitely, local governments to state to federal governments are going to be big consumers of data. I think they already are. I think they're just still in the process of building in systems to integrate and to manage that data efficiently. Knowing that a lot of government infrastructure is still behind the times in some ways, but you see these big contracts being won by companies like Oracle, Microsoft, Tesla, or us, Tesla as well. Just in terms of organizations, governments trying to modernize their infrastructure. So that definitely is a good thing for companies like us, where we have the data. Once they figure out how to start taking in data, they don't have to even go looking for it. So, that it's definitely an important area where, we've actually developed some spin-off products like KGBase, which is a knowledge graph tool for, teams to essentially get more access to their data without having to have such a technical expertise to do so. So, we're trying to influence that adoption curve, especially in places like government and lumber, real estate, construction, plumbing. There's definitely a lot of industries that have avoided having to really innovate in terms of technology, but who knows how much longer they can wait at this point.
Absolutely, absolutely. In your mind, as we kind of think through, alternative data, what do you think are some of the challenges in the industry, today? I know we mentioned, things like sales cycles and building people's fluencies, but where do you think some of the challenges are that either hedge funds or corporates need to sort of overcome?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. Doing sales for as long as I have, I typically avoid putting the onus on customers to do something. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Sometimes I feel like it's what do companies need to do to guide their customers, to guide the markets to what they see as the future. Um, but if I do look at it as, okay, what do these companies need to do? I think they just need to jump in. Like these companies have, they have teams, they have people. So, this is more so a corporate problem, but they need to, you know, typically there's one person at a company or on a team who's going to be like, hey, we need some data, we need to solve these problems, we need to look outside to find answers to it. But I would probably garner that, like, those people need more support internally. You know what I'm saying? They at least need an appropriate medium to be able to say, hey, I talked to this company, they gave me tailored insights for this particular sector where we have a bunch of our competitors in. What can we do with it? And they need to have a process to say, hey, let's evaluate it, let's check the quality of it, and let's test it, and let's give them an answer. And to be honest, whether it's a no or a yes, if that process can happen, I think that creates a lot of value. And that's kind of the cool parts about working at Thinknum, is even if we don't end up getting onboarding an enterprise client, or whoever, a team in a finance related organization, even if we don't get them, they're going to get some data from us, because we provide them data to look at that's actually relevant, and they're going to learn something about their space. So, it should be an ingrained kind of exercise to get data, systematically look at it, evaluate it, and to, make decisions. And that'll speed up everyone's time. So we're not wasting each other's time. We're not leading each other on, and we're creating value for it, because we get to learn from the customer of, hey, we don't really like it for this reason, or we could use it, but we might need some more of, this type of data. And, that's great for the company, or the companies, here's data on your top 3 competitors across global markets in this region. And that's going to be extremely helpful for that analyst. They'll still have the data. I think it's kind of, looking at it, to your earlier points, as a long-term relationship. In startups, sometimes we're so driven to grow, sell. And we're going so fast horizontally, but we forget to dig deeper vertically and create more value across the entire business chain. So, I think it's definitely a symbiotic relationship, and in a culture where, data is necessary, and then a process where we have people in place who can look at data and decide on whether we want it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Sometimes I feel like working on the street, it's like attending a small liberal arts college. It's like everyone seems to know everyone, at least by face. So they've had some idea of who they are, or what they do, or some type of experience with them. As big as the industry is, it's a relatively small one as well. And I can only imagine, similar to me, that you talk and meet with tons of people, in the industry, on the street, that are focused on alternative data like you and I are. Who are some of the people or peers that at other firms that are doing some really intriguing work that you admire, at their companies?
Sure. So yeah, so I've like, being that I'm doing a lot of business development work in a new space, it's hard to talk to people who know because to be honest, there's a lot of trailblazing, like
Sure.
especially when it comes to bringing alternative data to the corporate space. There's no like kind of thought leader of alternative data in the corporate world who actually is from the corporate world, if you get what I'm saying. They're probably an analyst or, an engineer by training, or they've worked in financial services or they've worked in consulting, and then they bring that expertise to the corporate side. So to kind of answer that point, like what I've done is I've tried to do these kind of thought leadership events, really just a webinar where I kind of find people that I see who are talking about certain themes within alternative data and how it relates to business impact. And then I, essentially talk to them. And then I say, hey, you know a lot about this. Can we host you at Thinknum, and can you do, a brief kind of conversation on maybe a book that you just released, or
Sure.
a paper that you just published. So, for some actual examples, like back in April, I reached out to Doug Laney, who, is a distinguished analyst, formerly at Gardner, and as well as still a thought leader in kind of the CDO data AI space, coined the term data as an asset. Last April, I reached out to them, and he was, definitely like, cool enough during kind of even a crazy time with COVID to, take some time to talk to me about things that he's working on, allow me to share what Thinknum's doing. And, we ended up doing one of the first kind of webinars of the company last year. And, it helped Thinknum not just talk about what we wanted to talk about in terms of, how important it is for companies to use data, but, it allowed us to reach out to a lot of, big major companies in the corporate space who ordinarily we wouldn't really have a great way to start that conversation. Um,
Sure. Sure.
so, another guy was Dr. Kirk Bourne, who's definitely, former NASA engineer, and, a really smart guy in how, alternative data really applies specifically to businesses. And we've, and then just, I have another good friend who I actually met at like literally the last of, or one of the last few events before COVID shut down the city. He leads the data society in New York, where they do a whole bunch of meetups and things like that. His name is Jason Forrest of McKinsey, and he leads their entire COVID response data visualization team. And he's been a great resource to learn from in the space. We actually did a webinar based on some curated research and published papers he's done on W.E.B. Du Bois, who essentially was actually very big in data science and data visualizations before we were even calling it that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then just most recently, I reached out to a USC professor by the name of Alec Levinson, and he heads their Center of Effective Organizations over at their Marshall School of Business, and he's a big thought leader in people analytics, organizational behavior, and from an academic perspective, there's kind of this context of where so much research has been done on helping companies understand how to optimize employee happiness and performance, and not really optimize it, but just how to put together the right process and structure to enable organizations to get good data to figure out what's going on with their people. And so we just did a webinar by the name of People Analytics for the Future of Work, Accelerating Predictive Capabilities. And we were able to get a bunch of CHROs, chief people officers, talent intelligence professionals, people analytics professionals, who were able to kind of talk and have a dialogue around, how we see the workforce changing. So I think, there's definitely, and obviously all the other conversations I just have with, clients and prospects and things like that. So, it's really been, kind of use maybe one or two, three people who really know the space, use them to kind of create a bigger platform where these conversations happen more spontaneously because people are just generally interested in understanding what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, Look, this has been really great conversation. Truly enjoyed it. Sounds like you're doing, incredible things over at Thinknum. I want to take the next minute to kind of just segue into something I've done with other guys. I'm going to mention a couple, two different scenarios. Give me your preferences, one versus the other. We typically call this like rapid 30-second drill. So I'll mention, two different options. You let me know which of the two you actually prefer. Cool.
Sure. If maybe I'll add just like a few words of context, but just a few words.
Sure, absolutely. So, you know, who do you prefer to, or who do you think has the largest TAM or opportunity in the space? Working with hedge funds or corporates?
Definitely corporates. There's more of them out there, and they're generating billions of revenue, which I think is a slightly different than managing billions of dollars in assets. So there's a big impact when we can get our data into a corp, because we know that's going to affect millions and billions of people in the world, and so we're excited to be involved in that kind of opportunity.
Sure. Who's hosted the best data conference that you've been to? Battlefin or Eagle Alpha?
Well, we did meet at Battlefin, man, and that was in Miami. And if you
Yeah.
remember correctly, man, that food was good. That
Yeah.
food was really good. Uh,
Yeah.
but Eagle Alpha, I've enjoyed all of their events as well. And New Data was actually just kind of propping up at the end before COVID kind of really took a smattering. So to be honest, I'm gonna leave it as a blank card, man. Whatever company jumps out first this year, I'll jump on their bandwagon.
For sure. Absolutely. Uh, New York or London?
I hear a lot of good things about London, man, but I'm a roll with New York City for sure.
Got it. Better sports franchise in New York, Yankees or the Brooklyn Nets?
I think Yankees have done their thing, man. They've done their thing. But what's going on in Brooklyn right now at the Barclays Center, James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, got Blake Griffin, Steve Nash. Like I've never. I mean, you got to go back to see a Yankees lineup like this. So right now, I think it's we're talking Nets.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. It's definitely must-see TV. It's pretty box office over there. Um, Across all of sports, who's the GOAT? Michael Jordan or Tom Brady?
This is a good one, man. Who's the GOAT, man? Who's the GOAT? I mean, like, I think when you look at it now, you can kind of like get more detailed about it. But I mean, like, Michael Jordan was so good. He played another sport and did a movie called Space Jam. Like, this guy was on some other stuff. I think I saw like Brady updated his profile on Twitter and like gave himself like the laser eyes or something that a bunch of these like Bitcoin
Exactly.
they're doing. So
Exactly.
if Brady can make some, like, I feel like to be the GOAT, like obviously you have to be the best and have the most ships, which both of these guys have now at this point. So I think it kind of becomes, well, what legend do you create outside of the game itself? And I think that's what really cements the top GOATs. I mean, but you got to have the ships too. So that's why we're not talking about LeBron right now.
That's true. I mean, look, yeah. I mean, just off the Jordan sneaker legacy alone, that will live in perpetuity, right?
Exactly.
And then in terms of news networks, better source for you, CNBC or Bloomberg?
Whew. CNBC has gotten us some waves, man. So like, it's gotten us some waves. Now I understand kind of, there's some grumblings about like, what is media's role in, finance? You know what I'm saying? Like there's always kind of what's going on there. But, I have a lot of respect for CNBC. They do what they do, and, the viewer can listen and learn from what they want to. So definitely solid source. Bloomberg, I think Bloomberg, although has great news, I think it's much bigger than just that. And so, the question is, what's a better news network? I'll have to say CNBC, But if you ask me what's like a more like steamrolling organization, I'd lean Bloomberg.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then lastly, look, there's a ton of people always looking to talking to me, emailing, LinkedIn, and I assume you get the same thing. A ton of people looking to, work in the industry, alternative data, whether it be working with, hedge funds like myself, corporates like you. What's the best form of advice you would give anyone looking to break into the industry?
Um, it's New York City. This is like fintech capital. And I think at the moment, alternative data is tied to that. So, I think it's best to plug into events, whether digitally or in person, as things kind of progress, and attend and meet people. When I first moved to New York City, I was largely driven by free food events, but next to that was meeting people, and that's how you learn. You can't learn if you're in a box, blindfolded with earbuds in. Like that's not how you're going to learn anything. So if you're trying to get to a space that's new, you got to learn first, and you got to crawl before you can walk, and you got to be humble, and you got to, essentially, you know, be the student. And at some point when you get good enough, the student surpasses the master. But be the student first, and go through your LinkedIn's and find out who's working in the space, even if it's not alternative data. Sometimes we get so stuck on alternative data, but really, alternative data is just a representation of data itself. And it's just a specific nuance of data that isn't so like widely adopted. And that's kind of what makes data so interesting. It's that when, you have, or you're talking about data that other people don't really understand or have access to, there's a lot of opportunity to create value from that data, at least in the beginning. So, it's kind of about, the whole point of alternative data is to do things in different ways, to find things that you haven't seen before or had access to. So, I would apply that approach in trying to learn about it and get into the space. What am I doing or what am I not doing? And am I falling into the same ways that I've always tried to do business or tried to, program software, et cetera? And is there things that I can do differently? Is there new people I can reach out to? Or is there new things I can learn to better my understanding and get more ingrained in the space?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What a great way to segue it off. Really appreciate the time. Abdus, this has been a fantastic conversation that I've had. Really enjoyed it. We're definitely going to have to do this again. Thanks so much, sir. Appreciate the time as always. And we're going to have to do this again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Aubrey. It was a true pleasure. Wishing you much success. I think this is a great platform. Can't wait to see the other great people you're going to talk with. And, I'll be following along for sure.
Absolutely. Appreciate the time. We will connect soon.
All right, my man. Take it easy.
Take care. Hey guys, if you found this episode helpful, useful, and you enjoyed the content, make sure to follow us on all the appropriate channels, subscribe to the cast, and leave a positive review. It really helps us continue to grow, put out amazing content, and it helps other people in the industry, find the platform and the channel as well, so that we can continue to grow and keep putting out fresh related news and content every day. Until the next time, this is ADN, providing alternative data news always, in all ways.